Hey there, Goa fans. This is Mark DJ Solitaire here with episode 138 of Retro Goa Explorations, my weekly series in which I share in each episode one of my favorite tracks from the 1990s Goa Trance psychedelic dance movement. So, after last week, when I shared a video excerpt from a Total Eclipse party, as in the project Total Eclipse, not the celestial event that it was at in Japan, I realized I haven't featured the band Total Eclipse in quite a while in this series, and it's time to do so. And so, one of the tracks that came to mind is, I think, just one of the all-time great ones. And it's got an interesting little story, and musically, I mean, it's just as good as it gets. As I said in the previous video, when I presented this track that Serge had played by this Greek project, Elephoids, uh, he was just an incredible DJ. I mean, Serge was just an absolute master. And from early on in the scene, he just absolutely knew how to sculpt a story just amazingly. And he had access to just fantastic music, including, of course, of what he produced. I mean, the guy was a genius. And I mean, I'm sure he still is a genius, but we don't have the benefit of having him in our scene anymore, unfortunately. But goodness, how we have benefited from his musical uh, brilliance. So this is a track that he wrote on his own. And, Total Eclipse had this agreement. There was the three of them uh, who worked together quite often, but also in different combinations and also solo. And they had a system whereby they voted like yay or nay to release a track, and everybody had to like it in order for a track to be released. So there were some tracks that didn't get released at the time because it didn't get 100% unanimous consent. And some of those came out later on, on the DAP Universe label. There's this wonderful, I think, 3 CD compilation of Total Eclipse tracks that includes some live material and also some tracks that didn't get put out way back then. And some of them were, from this time that I'm talking about, and, where we had the, video of Total Eclipse in Gifu in 1998 with me dancing around, taking up half the dance floor. So Serge wrote some tracks on his own. Waiting for a New Life, really famous one, is just Serge on his own. Some tracks are Stefan Luik. Some tracks are, the three of them. Some of them are, different combinations. This track that we're going to listen to today is unbelievable. And I'm still kind of amazed at two things. First of all, that it was only released on one compilation that I've been able to locate. The original release was on this obscure, one-off, seemingly compilation that included some absolute killers, including Extreme's STOP, which was a B-side. Absolutely phenomenal track. I mean, this is just like a killer compilation, and it has this phenomenal Total Eclipse track, Partycles. Now, first of all, I'm going to say I love this title because, of course, it's a play on word of particles, like, subatomic particles. And we've got, some wonderful samples, in earlier tracks, like the Infinity Project, right? When you bombard the electrons do it to the neutrons and all of that. And, anybody who's sort of had that micro macro state on the dance floor and especially dancing under the stars, we can sort of imagine what it's like that each, individual unit of consciousness is a particle in the sort of the overall makeup of the universe. And so having it particles spelt with a Y is just brilliant because it's like, at the party, we're all different particles of this, sort of grand, conscious, orchestrated, whatever this is, field that we're in. And so, brilliant title. And when I say brilliant track, I mean, this is really among the best. And Stefan told me, I remember back then, that Serge wrote this in about 4 hours. I'll repeat that. Serge wrote this track in about 4 hours. And he said, I remember Steph saying, oh, once Serge got started, you just couldn't stop him. You know, he was just hyper focused. Well, I mean, he sure was. Now, the master dat of this one is dated March 1997. This only came out on this compilation in 1998. Now we have, there's a version, a live version of it that we can hear in the Total Eclipse at Liquid Room live set, right? The Live in Tokyo 1998 that was released on Suntrip, an event that I was at and somehow have, no photos or no flyer from. It's just so weird and so random how I just, kept everything in some areas and not in others. But I certainly remember being on the dance floor and where I was, and it was fantastic, fantastic set. And that was the time that I met Serge and Louis, that Steph had introduced me to them. So the track had been around for over a year before it was released. And then it just didn't get the wide release that I think a track of this quality should. So the Master Dat also has 5 versions, and it's a fascinating evolution to hear how some riffs came and went. Some were voiced differently. And then, the 5th version is the one that was released. Now, possibly an unpopular opinion amongst collectors and folks who love unreleased music, sometimes the released version is the best one. Sorry, but it's true. Not always, though. And this is the important thing to recognize, right? So on Dat Records, we put out, 2 CDs of Doof, where we had the album and then a parallel universe album where it was alternate mixes of all of the tracks. And that came out of the fact that back in 97, I'd been at a party and Nick handed me a DAT with an alternate mix of Destination Bomb. Well, that happens to be better than the released one. And Nick now agrees. And that's the version that he plays out. So sometimes it happens that the alternate version is actually better. And sometimes not. And sometimes there's still just some interest, shake things up. But, in terms of hearing the creative process, it's fascinating. So I've got a couple of excerpts that we'll listen to after we listen to the release track, just so you can hear a couple of, how the sounds evolved. But when it comes to the storyline and the emotional content, that's kind of the key here. The last of the 5 mixes, I did a check, and it is, that's the released one. It is so off the charts, sky opening, expansive, soul wrenching, in terms of overall musical and energetic content and expression, that you really just can't beat this. It's absolute magic. And this is what I think a lot of us experienced back in the time. And I think this is something why, this music still has this allure for people who weren't there back then and have heard this music played out and said, this is a whole other kind of musical language and expression, and just overall creative expression. So, we're going to listen now to the released final edit of Partycles by Total Eclipse, this unbelievable track that Serge produced somehow in 4 hours. And buckle your seatbelts, folks, because this is a ride, and what a beautiful one. Just these gorgeous, look at that hypnotic pattern and the elegant sound with that rough guitar and that bouncy sort of little synth sound, all really classic Total Eclipse sounds. But this chime thing, it's just like this cosmic timepiece. Then you get that beautiful bounce, and notice how the rhythm of those chimes seems to shift. You just have these voices interjecting and coming, and he's kind of growling things. It's something really about Total Eclipse. Sometimes you have this absolute elegant refinement, and then you have these sort of granular, rough edges, and it's this beautiful balance of elegance and, robustness. It's one of the things I love about our scene. And beautiful percussion. It's really quite light so far, but also cosmic, and those floaty atmospheric sounds above. Then we get that sort of, again, that rough Total Eclipse guitar. Then beautiful bass line, just so simple. And there's going to be another wonderful sound that's going to come in shortly. There we go. Again, very Total Eclipse. We've heard this in some of the earlier classics. But none of it sounds like, it doesn't sound recycled at all. I mean, this is a really fresh combination of the storyline. Now again, notice how it's building up. Just keeps building. Then we get this gorgeous, triumphant, but still slightly restrained march. It's not full on yet. And when I say full on again, I'm talking the British adjective, not what some people have called this style of hyper-aggressive music. So just listen to the beauty of all of the sounds. And then, again, one of those gorgeous, again, evocative Total Eclipse sonorities. Then it goes up, and then comes down. And then this is kind of a toxic caterpillar, kind of good old bouncy sound. So it's just, you get this sort of stability of that bounce while all this chaos is going on above, and then that voice. How many things are happening and building. Just listen how this voice builds, how the other stuff supports this expression, and where it's going to go. I mean, here we just get this cosmic, anguished combination of anguish, joyful expression. It's like, again, consciousness waking up to itself and sort of like, what is going on? Definitely an experience I had on the dance floor more than once. And then there's that riff adding to it. Right, so it's adding a little bit of impulse to the whole scenario. You get to catch your breath a little bit. Then we just have, so there's sort of those otherworldly, sort of almost like swamp-like animal kind of sounds coming, chirping and burping. And we have that joyful, quixotic kind of Total Eclipse riff here. This is the kind of line that Steph was so great at also. Just listen to the interplay. It's actually two lines going on. Again, now the tension's starting to build up again. Now we have this very quirky, quixotic kind of ending. Very playful and, again, sort of otherworldly. Things really wind down, quite literally. I mean, really? Tell me why that wasn't released on every compilation. I mean, what a masterpiece. And again, a real sign of, what was the passion and the drive and the creative impulse that was funding what these musicians were doing in their creative time in the studio. Serge got this idea and he just went for it and he just created this unbelievable masterpiece in such a short space of time. And again, I noted how, we recognize this synth sound from this track and maybe that sound, from others and so on. There is nothing here that sounds, though, that this is just a cut and paste kind of track. Nothing whatsoever. And so I certainly don't want to imply that with what I said in terms of that. But, each project had they had their studio set up with their unique sounds. They weren't all using these digital workstations that were, all using the same samples and the same sounds. So they had their character, and they also had the range of, different characteristics that they brought in terms of the tone, the mood and the style of their tracks. And Total Eclipse has, for me, always been one of the ones that had the most variety. There's a few projects who did, and they're among the peak. And, I just consider myself so fortunate that from the time, I heard Serge DJ first in 1995. I remember the impression Blade Runner made on me then, but I first heard the band in 1996 at an outdoor event in Japan just before I went off to India for the first time. Not Goa somehow, but and then, as I've said, I've heard them how many times since. But in that period from 96 to 99, I probably heard them about, between half a dozen and a dozen times, and every time was phenomenal. Every time was different. And, just such a unique presence and array of messages and stories that each track would tell, and also the spontaneity and the creativity they would bring to their live sets. Each one was different. So this track then is just, it has those characteristics, but there's nothing old, there's nothing recycled in that sense, right? In terms of, we'll just, toss something in there. No, it's all like familiar ingredients, but a completely new expression. Now, I was saying that, there's 5 mixes on the session DAT, and, there's a really interesting evolution that goes on. There's a different bass line, or a sort of one line that comes in, and then the way that the guitar comes in later on, it's also voiced really differently. So I'm just going to play a couple of brief excerpts here. So that bass line, right, is different. I like the way it gets sort of double voiced there for a second. So that's kind of neat. But I don't think that the whole storyline evolves quite as well. But here, now notice how we have with that guitar, the way that's gated. But while we've got the bass line, sort of going on and off like that as well, It's really interesting. And it's got that sort of, rougher, granular Total Eclipse edge. So it's pretty cool. But the track, I don't think in the earlier versions, I don't think it has that emotional release and that expansive, like, this is it, that comes out in that smooth guitar riff, in terms of how it's voiced and how it's done in the final version. So while that's smooth and legato, right, the other stuff is oscillating and going in and out. That combination of textures instead of the match, I think it carries more weight. And I think there's also just the emotion. You can feel it and hear it. And that's also, again, where the artist is, they're working all of these versions. Let's do another one. Let's do another one. And the whole creative expression is building up. So, musically and in terms of a creative insight, it's pretty fascinating. It might just be that, of course, I'm emotionally attached to this final version, but you know me, I also love alternate versions. And there's some fascinating stuff here, but just I really want the bigger, what's the best, what's the most expensive. Uh, I'll keep listening and, maybe you'll hear an alternate version once in one of my sets sometime. But you can't go wrong with the released edition one. I mean, it's just phenomenal. I did play it at this is my first ZNA set morning in August 2015. How was that, 10 years ago? But yeah, it's a magical track. So hats off to Serge, the musical genius who put this together just so unbelievably. And what a treasure. So why don't we listen to the whole thing without my commentary? I'm Mark, DJ Solitaire, wrapping up episode 138 of Retro Goa Explorations, leaving you now with the Total Eclipse masterpiece, Partycles.